Good afternoon and welcome to the Leverage Technologies Focus Overview and Demonstration, the Future of Financial Reporting. My name is Brett Mundell. I work with the team at Leverage Technologies, and I'm joined today by Scott Salter and Craig Medlin from Phocas. Craig is going to do most of the presenting today. He's going to take you through a demonstration of the Phocas solution. And we are going to talk quite a bit today about financial reporting, budgeting, that side of things. I want to just say as well that from a leverage point of view, I know we have customers joining us who are typically from the Sage environment, from MYOB Advanced and from SAP. The team at Leverage works very closely with Phocas across our solutions, and Phocas brings into us extended business intelligence, reporting and dashboards pre-integrated into our ERP solutions. So without further ado, I want to hand you over to Craig and the team at Phocas. Thanks, Craig.
No worries. Thanks for that, Brett. And yeah, thank you everybody for taking the time to have a look at Phocas. So what we're going to do today, this is a quick agenda of the things that we want to cover today. So we're going to cover why we're here, a bit of scene setting. We're going to talk about the Phocas financial statements product, the governance and security that actually brings in, some of the challenges we solve, and also talk about our budgeting solution. And instead of just talking about them, we're actually going to show them to you as well. So giving you a chance to see the product in action and how it might apply to your business. So let's jump in and we'll just talk a little bit about scene setting. So Phocas, as a business, we work with over 2,000 companies around the world, a lot in the wholesale, distribution, manufacturing and retail and not-for-profit space. So we've got lots of experience working with businesses, whether they're operational or product and service. It doesn't really matter. If you've got data, it's something that we can actually help you with and help you really make sense of what's in that data. So we're going to start by talking about financials. So regardless of what ERP system you might be using, whether it's a SAP or MYOB or a Sage product, doesn't really matter. Phocas can integrate with all of them. But a lot of people that who are using an ERP system, this structure will look relatively familiar, where we've got the ERP system sitting at the top. It's our source of truth. And we've got people entering data into there, and it's normally then taken to the financial controller and down to the CFO and then down to our operational heads in the business. And the medium in which this is done is normally in a spreadsheet. So often there's a lot of manual work involved. And as you can see that in this example here, the CEO and the chief marketing officer have got questions. And what ends up happening is the CFO and the financial controller and the bookkeeper are normally involved in answering those questions or having to make changes to data to satisfy those users' needs. This whole process can be a bit tiresome and cumbersome and does involve a lot of people's time to make this work for the business. Now, the approach that we take at Phocas is, we still see your ERP as the absolute source of truth. And instead of sitting it at the top, we actually put it in the center of your data world. And we actually sit our products around the edges of it. And what this means is people are able to interact with the data very, very quickly and get access to the data and answer their own questions without needing to bother the finance team with requests to answer those questions. So our approach is much more streamlined. It allows people to be self-sufficient in answering their own questions and having that single version of truth. And you'll see how some of this plays out when we jump into the demo. And what we will be showing you in the demo is our financial product that allows us to not only visualize our data, but analyze what the data is telling us and even customize the views. And you'll see how this plays out when we jump into the product. But instead of having to do everything manually in spreadsheets, or having to try and maintain multiple charts of accounts in the ERP system, or make compromises in your chart structure to sort of satisfy different audiences, you can have exactly what those different audiences need, the way they actually need it. But if you're going to be sharing data, especially something sensitive like financial data, with a wider audience, you need to be able to keep it secure and govern that data. So we've absolutely taken this into account in our financial product, actually across the entire Phocas range. Security is absolutely up there as a paramount feature of our product suite. So what you can see here is two P&L statements, the same P&L statement actually, but how it's viewed by a CEO versus a branch manager. And you'll see that these numbers, while the structure is more or less the same, what we're actually showing the users is slightly different, because different users may have access to the same documents or same statements, but the data they see within it might differ. The classic example being the branch manager may not see wages and salaries, but may just see the overall expenses for their branch, where the CEO can see what's going on in the entire business. Now, in the demo, what we're going to be talking about is not just financial analysis and reporting, but how budgeting and forecasting can fit into that. So once again, using the same style we did just before, this, I'm sure to most people, is a fairly common workflow that people would have, where budget time comes along, people have to get data in through spreadsheets and rolling up data and taking things from different places and producing a budget that then goes into the line of business or the business heads, and then it kind of flows back through, and we end up with many versions of it. And it's very hard to manage those, who changes what, and things change. People don't notice the change until it's too late and the budget is published, and we end up going back through this process. And normally, because of how complex this process or cumbersome it is, it's not done more than once a year, which, especially in the times that we find ourselves in, we need to adjust budgets, be more agile, and be able to adapt to our current environment. So this process doesn't overly support that. And just to summarize what we're looking at, this quite often will be static. It's very standalone. Once we pull the data, that's it. It's very linear, very much have to use just assumptions. We don't always have access to the more accurate data, and it can only ever be retrospective. Now, the Phocas approach is very much like what we did with financials. We really kind of put your data in the center there, and have the ERP and even things like CRM data or HR data kind of flowing in through Phocas to give you a real complete view of what's going on in your business. So as opposed to being static, it's much more dynamic, it's collaborative. We can have other people involved in the process. We can integrate data from live sources, and we can, instead of it just being a once a year thing, we can be much more agile and use it as a continuous planning tool. So in summary, we won't be covering Phocas Analytics today, but we do actually allow for you to use analytics, whether it's your sales data, your inventory, or your purchasing within Phocas. We can do the financials, which we'll be covering today, and the budgeting and forecasting. And it's the actual combination of all of these that give us that company-wide analysis, a really one-stop shop that can do anything and everything in relation to reporting, analytics, financials, and budgeting within your business. So I think that's probably enough of slides. Let's actually jump in and have a look at the product itself. We will be having some questions at the end, so by all means do feel free to enter them in as we're going. So like in the slide you saw, Phocas has a visualization component, but the way we actually present Phocas to our users is through a cloud-based interface. So whether you're using an on-premise ERP or a cloud ERP, it doesn't actually matter for Phocas. Phocas will take data from those different ERP systems and give you this reporting and analytics view. Now, the way people interact with Phocas, there's a couple of different ways that people interact with it. The visualization, or dashboarding as it's quite often referred to, is one way that most people will start their day when thinking about data analytics. And what I've got here is a dashboard looking at some financial information. So I've got my profit and loss statement in here. I've got my margin for the current month, profit and expenses, and how they're tracking against either budget or last year. But also things like the trends that we're seeing in gross profit, and not just at an invoice level, but as we see it at a financial level. So I can see what my trend has been, or even what EBITDA is doing by month. Now, it's all good and well to have these dashboards as a way of getting a quick visual view of what's going on in the business, but they're only really giving us part of the picture. When we need to ask more questions, we don't have to find another report. We don't have to ask the finance team to tell us more. We can simply click on these and drill through them. When we drill through, we're taken into what we refer to as the grid. And this is a place where we can come and ask any questions that we want relating to the data and follow our own train of thought, and not have to bother the finance team or somebody in accounts to get us the answers to the questions that we have. At the moment, I'm looking at my profit and loss statement here, where I can see the current, previous, and budget, and I can see that I'm looking at the last 12 months compared to the year prior. Now, I can change how much data I'm looking at whenever I want, so I haven't had to have saved last month's P&L or last year's P&L or anything like that. I can very easily either use predefined periods, such as looking at last year's P&L or 2 years ago, or just looking at the current financial year in year-to-date form. I can chop and change this as I see fit, including selecting any custom period. So if you have overseas entities or you use a 445 calendar, you can have those in Phocas, allowing you to slice and dice or group your data based on those time periods. Now, this P&L here is a pretty standard looking profit and loss, but we will out of the box use the profit and loss that you, or the chart of account structure you have in your ERP system. And I'll be showing you in a moment how we can also take that as a baseline, but then create additional statements that might be for other audiences that don't always follow that standard chart structure that we have in our ERP system. For the structure I have here, I can see that my business has $10.4 million in operating expenses. That compares to about just over 9 million previously, and a budget of 11 million. So I can see over last year, but still under budget. And that's at a high level. I can drill down into more of an account level where I can see those that are under budget, but also some that are over budget. So something like bad debt is actually over budget and over last year. So we might have some investigation to do there. Now, if you're a single entity, you might want to drill straight down into the transactions straight from here. But if you're not a single entity, maybe you have multiple companies, you operate in multiple geographies, whatever the case may be, you might even want to have different departments. It's completely up to you. In my case, I've got multiple countries that contribute into this consolidated P&L. I can choose to actually add those as levels into my statement. So while I still have $10.4 million in expense, I can expand this out and see the contribution for each of the 3 countries that I trade in. If I wanted to expand my Australian business, I can now see that the bad debt number is adjusted to just that of Australia's contribution. I can see I wasn't expecting anything on the budget. I did 62 last year and I've more than doubled it. So at this point, I now may wish to drill right down into the journal level, so I can see all the journal transactions that went into that particular number. So we don't have to run back to the ERP, or we don't have to ask somebody to run a report. We can actually do this within Phocas. So this is something that we can also control. Maybe people can't drill down into these lower levels. If you don't want them to, they can't, but this is something the product can absolutely do. Everything you see in Phocas can also be exported at the click of a button. So for those of you that still need to use it externally, you can. And we can also save these if we wanted to, because we found something interesting, we wish to save it. Maybe we're going to share it with some other people in the organization. That governance that we mentioned earlier will make sure that even if you shared it with a higher level of privilege of the data, when the person you share it with opens it, they will only see the data they're allowed to see. So it's always got your back to make sure that you're not sharing something that you shouldn't. Okay, I'll just come back to my profit and loss. Now this view here, while we can produce out of the box a profit and loss, a balance sheet, a cash flow and a trial balance out of the box using that chart structure out of your ERP, we're not constrained to that. So if I wanted to actually build my own chart structure, the product does ship with a statement builder, meaning that I could take this structure and clone it to create another one that I'm going to edit, or I could create a completely new structure from scratch, or even if I just want to make some edits to my existing statement. And changes you might want to make could be something as simple as changing names or changing the order in which this statement presents. Maybe adding additional calculations or groups is something you wanted to do. Changing how a calculation is derived, even using non-financial data in your financial statements. So you can see here, I've got headcount. Headcount is not something that's stored in my GL. It's something that's coming from an external source like a spreadsheet or a time and attendance system, but I wish to use that in my financial statement. And unit sold, which might be still coming from the ERP system, from my sales quantities, using that to work it out against my GL gross profit that takes into account freight and rebates, as opposed to what I might see at a sales level, is something that I can do inside here. We have all this functionality and ability to create these statements as I see fit, but also not just the statement structure, actually choosing which accounts, which of my GL accounts belong into which groups. This is what allows you to have different structures for different audiences. So if you've got branch managers that need more detail than branch managers that, from management that need to have a bit more of a summarized view, or vice versa, you can do that. You don't have to have a compromise with a one-size-fits-all chart structure. You can be much more particular about what people see. So hopefully that's making sense for everybody. There's a lot you can do in here, including drilling through and slicing and dicing your data to really uncover what's driving some of these numbers. But we might jump into some of the budgeting functionality that we have in the time we've got allocated. So just to paint the picture before we jump into our budgeting module, is budgets traditionally are, like we had in the slides, they're fairly manual. We'd like to report against them, but building them can be a bit of a challenge. So whether your budget was set in Excel, like this one here, where this is a GL budget that might have come from an Excel document, once we're in financials, it doesn't really matter. We can actually analyze and slice and dice those numbers. But what we can do in Phocas is make the process of getting these budget numbers much, much easier. So I've just jumped across into our budgeting tool here, and I've actually got my chart of account structure here, and I have my different countries in here, or the 3 entities like we were just looking at on the previous screen. But now we're in a budget view, and what we're actually doing here is budgeting for the next for this calendar year. I've done a January through to December budget, and I've populated it with last year's actuals. Now we can choose what we populate this with. That could be last year's actuals, it could be last year's budget, it could be the previous completed forecast. It does, or actuals from 3 years ago. It's completely up to you. But as opposed to just starting with nothing, we can take our chart of account structure by our different entities and bring in the actual. So we've got a really nice baseline to build from. And I'm hoping this look and feel is fairly familiar to most, because we do have that Excel look and feel where we do have a formula bar up the top, and we've got that gridded view. But unlike a lot of the challenges we have when we budget in Excel, we solve a lot of that here in Phocas by being able to have multiple people contribute to the same budget and not have them overwriting each other's changes or having to maintain multiple versions. And the way we do that is with this workflow. So workflow allows us to see who's in control of the line that we're actually budgeting against, and making sure that we're keeping an audit trail and keeping the integrity of the line so we know who's actually making those changes. Now, making changes is really easy. So if this previously was 95,000 and I'm going to make it 130,000, I can simply type into the cell. I might want to drag that across because for the next 4 months, that's what I'm expecting. I might make those changes, and then I want to assign it over to somebody else. Maybe I'm going to send it to Joanne. So I can actually choose to allocate things to other people. Sorry. And when we assign something to somebody else, they might not be the end recipient of that. So somebody might make a change and then send it on to somebody else. There is an approval process back up through the chain. So as each person makes changes, those changes have to be approved by the person that sent them to them. And you can actually see that audit trail. We do actually keep a trail of the history. So as more people get involved, we can always see who's actually touched the line. Now, when it comes to making changes in our budget, it's actually very straightforward. You can see we can easily type in the figures and drag them around as we see fit. We can also write our formulas if we want to using the formula bar. But we also have some other built-in features that make the budgeting process a lot easier. So one of those might actually be being able to take a number like what I've got here on accountancy fees that has some high numbers, some low numbers, some zeros. It's quite a it's got a lot of seasonality in these numbers. Now, if we're budgeting, we might be budgeting for an extra $10,000 in cost in our accountancy lines. So we can make that change and choose, do we want to spread that number evenly across the periods? Given we've got so much seasonality, that's probably not going to give us a very accurate budget. So let's actually base it on that previous seasonality. What you'll see when I make that change is it's proportioned that new amount in relation to the weighting of the previous seasonality, keeping the zeros as zeros, but proportioning that new amount accordingly. Now, something like bad debt, I might not have a fixed number, but I do know that maybe in this case, I want to reduce it by a percentage, maybe like 5%. So I can apply that rule. And once again, it will pick up the seasonality and trend and apply accordingly. The whole way through, we are actually tracking an audit trail of every single change that we make. So whether I am reviewing this right now or 3 months from now, if I want to see the history of what that cell has gone through, who changed it and what it changed from, we actually have that. So not only is it easy to ask more people to be involved in the budget process now and make sure that we're not overriding each other's changes, but we can also see who changed what and when. So we don't have this version 1, version 2, version 42 type of situation in our business. We can maintain a single version and see everything that's going on. Now, when it comes to a lot of businesses, their sales is a bit more complex than a single GL line. So in my business, sales is really just one GL line. I can see there's my Australian business has $24 million in sales, and that's been the trend. And I could use those spread features like what we just looked at to make changes. But we can actually connect to other focused data sources. And this is where sometimes bringing in data that is a bit more granular, and if we're asking more people to be involved in the budget process, asking a sales team to give us a single GL style line for their projections on sales, we might not really get the answer we want. So we're able to connect to other parts of your ERP data to get a more granular view. So if I wanted to control revenue from sales, I could bring in my sales data with revenue, offset to last year, so we pick up the same seasonality. But instead of budgeting at a single GL line, let's actually budget it at a lower level. Maybe we're budgeting at a sales rep level or a territory level, or I'm going to budget at a product class level. And I'm going to do it by the same entities that we had before, like the Australia, UK, and US. Now I can pick which of those I wish to use. So I could budget for all three, or maybe today I'm just going to use this particular mapping for the UK business. Now, my business has 5 different high-level product groups that I sell. I could be budgeting only one of these or a couple of these. It might spread across different revenue accounts in my GL. In my case, all 5 belong in my sales account, my GL account. So I'm going to create the relationship between those two. Now, by doing so, what I've actually done is I've got my now $23 million in sales for my UK business, but now it's actually broken down at a much more granular level. In this case, my product groups. If I come back to my main tab here, we'll see that the UK business is being driven by that particular tab. So any changes, I can't make changes here if I wanted to, because this line is now being controlled from over here. So I can make adjustments here. I have the workflow. So if I want to assign this over to somebody else with some notes, I can. And that means that we're able to get people to budget at a more appropriate level for the data that they have. So I've done this at a product group level. You may wish to introduce additional levels like sales reps. So when the sales reps come in, they're budgeting their product sales for their particular territories. So we're able to ask more people to contribute. More people can give us the data at a level that their best understanding of the data, which means we generally get a more accurate budget. Now, once all this work is done, we've done our revenue budgets and we've set up our COGS and done all of our financial planning for budgets, we have the option to actually publish this back into our financials. So back where we started this demo, we can actually create a budget, either creating something entirely new or overwriting an existing budget. And we're able to analyze it against our actuals and slice and dice our data at a financial level. But given that we asked our salespeople to also be involved, we can actually publish this back into where if they're using Phocas for sales analytics, we can also publish this back to them as well. So the finance team and the sales team are actually working to the same budget numbers. We don't have two different budgets done at different times by different teams, and then they didn't actually reconcile. We really move away from that as an actual issue in the business. So just to summarize what we've covered, the Phocas budgeting tool allows us to very easily pull the data in from the ERP system using all the chart of account structure that we've got, introduce it to make it very easy yet governed to make changes to our budgets. We can introduce additional people if we need to into our budget process. We are able to spread the data as we see fit, so we can make adjustments very, very quickly. And we can pull data, not just revenue data, mind you, but any data that we want to bring in, we can, and we can do that at various levels. We won't today go into too much detail on it, but while you saw me using this database mapping tool to be able to pull data from other sources, there is also a headcount driver where we can import data from your time and attendance or your payroll system for the purpose of actually budgeting your headcount. So being able to do a headcount budget, whether it's by department or division, you can do that and control who can see it. So there's another layer of governance over the top of this to make sure people aren't actually viewing payroll data, very sensitive payroll data, when they shouldn't. So you've got quite a lot of governance and control over those numbers. So I'm hoping that's given you a bit of an idea of what Phocas can do in regards to not just financial reporting, but also being able to budget and do those budgets at various levels. I might see, Scott, if any questions have come through.
Yeah, Craig, we do. We've got a couple that have come in via the chat panel. The first question is, someone has asked, are you able to export the budgets out of the budgeting tool for use in the ERP system? So export those budgets straight back into the ERP system.
Yep, no, it's a good question. You can export the budget data down at an account level if you do need to bring it into your ERP system. We do find that customers don't have a need to do that as often, or it becomes a bit more of a redundant process, because the reason they're exporting the budgets is purely for the reasons of analyzing it. And Phocas, obviously, having that financial statements analytics means that you can actually budget right down to that very granular level and compare it to your actuals within the product. But if you do need to export it, into your ERP, we can provide you a CSV or Excel export of your budgets at whatever level you need it.
Okay, good. Jeff has asked if we can bring data in from outside of the ERP. I think you probably covered that in your presentation, didn't we? We said we can bring data from multiple sources.
We can, and those sources can be something as simple as a spreadsheet. It could be data via a CRM system or some other source, either a local source, an ERP source, or even a cloud source using an API. So most businesses have more than one source. Phocas allows us to pull data from multiple sources.
Okay. And we have one more question from Stephanie. Can I show Phocas data to people outside of the business?
Yeah, this is one that we've seen come up a little bit, particularly now with the budgeting and the finance process, or sometimes even on the operational side. But there can be users of data that maybe sit outside your organization. So maybe it's an external consultant or auditor, or it could even be your customers who need access to data. So Phocas being once removed from the ERP system means that we can actually have people that maybe need access to data, and you don't want to be sending them data in spreadsheets and the like. You want to have more governance over what they're looking at and what they're doing. You can give users access to, it could be something as simple as just the dashboard, or they could have more capabilities to do drill throughs. But yes, you can give people access to the data within Phocas to somebody external, because you've got that governance and security. You can really make sure they're only looking at the data that's relevant to them.
No questions other than those three.
Craig, thanks very much for great presentation, and I think it just highlights for us our customers across Sage, across MYOB Advanced, and across SAP. The key elements there today: financial reporting with that drill through to further information, the ability to share information across the organization, and then budgeting, for those growing organizations that are looking at their budgeting in more detail and wanting to build the budget from the bottom up across the departments. You can see the clarity in the way that that's possible through Phocas. So I just want to thank you both, Scott and Craig, for your presentation today, for the great relationship with Leverage and what you're doing for our Leverage customers to bring advanced reporting and business intelligence to our customers. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have an enjoyable day.